Hey man, we need to talk about something that's going to blow your mind. Most guys spend their entire lives trying to get a woman's attention, but they're doing it all wrong. They're buying flowers, sending good morning texts, being available 24/7, and wondering why she loses interest. But what if I told you there's a completely different approach? What if the secret to occupying her thoughts isn't about chasing her at all? See, here's what most men don't understand. Women's minds work differently than ours. When we're interested, we think about her constantly. We obsess. We plan our next move. But when a woman is truly captivated by a man, it's not because he's always there. It's because he's created something in her mind that she can't shake. Today, I'm breaking down the 5 psychological triggers that make women think about you nonstop. And listen, this isn't manipulation. This is understanding how attraction really works. This goes deeper than looks, deeper than money. This is about becoming the kind of man who lives in her head rent-free. And trust me, once you understand these triggers, you'll never go back to chasing again. Let's get into it. The first thing is that you're unpredictable in the best way possible. You know what kills attraction faster than anything? Predictability. When a woman can read you like a book, when she knows exactly what you're going to say, what you're going to do, how you're going to react, she gets bored. And boredom is the death of desire. But here's where most guys get it wrong. They think unpredictable means being an asshole or playing games. No, that's not what this is about. Unpredictable means you're not following the script that every other guy follows. Let me paint you a picture. Most guys, when they like a woman, they become predictable. They text her good morning every day. They always say yes to her plans. They never disagree with anything she says. They become this safe, boring option. And safe is the enemy of attraction. But the man who occupies her thoughts, he's different. Sometimes he's deep and philosophical. Sometimes he's playful and teasing. She never knows which version of him she's going to get. And that mystery, that uncertainty, it creates mental loops in her brain. Here's what I mean. You might have a serious conversation about life goals one day, and the next day you're challenging her to a dance-off in your kitchen. You might be the guy who remembers every detail she tells you, but you're also the guy who disappears for a few hours without explanation because you're building something important. Women are used to men who are either always available or complete jerks. But when you're neither, when you're genuinely busy with your own life, passionate about your goals but also present when it matters, you become a puzzle she can't solve. And puzzles, my guy, puzzles live in people's heads. The second thing is that you have boundaries that actually mean something. Listen, most men think having boundaries means being difficult or playing hard to get. But that's not what this is about. Boundaries are about self-respect, and self-respect is magnetic as hell. Here's the difference between a man with boundaries and a man without them. A man without boundaries says yes to everything, drops his plans whenever she calls, lets her treat him however she wants because he's afraid of losing her. But a man with boundaries, he knows his worth. He'll say, "No, I can't hang out tonight. I have something important to do." He'll call out behavior that doesn't align with how he wants to be treated. He won't compromise his values just to keep her happy. And here's what happens in her mind when you have real boundaries. She starts questioning herself. She starts thinking, wait, why isn't he bending over backward for me like every other guy does? Am I not attractive enough? Is there something about him I don't know? Boundaries create respect, but more than that, they create curiosity. When you're not available at her beck and call, when you have your own life, your own priorities, your own standards, she starts wondering what makes you different. I remember this one guy told me about his ex, who used to cancel plans last minute all the time. Most guys would just accept it, maybe complain a little, but still be available whenever she decided to show up. But this guy, he had a boundary. He said, "Look, I understand things come up, but I'm not going to keep my schedule open for maybes. From now on, if you cancel with less than 24 hours notice, I'm going to make other plans." At first, she thought he was being dramatic. But then something shifted. She started actually respecting his time because he respected his own time. And more importantly, she started thinking about him differently. He wasn't just another guy who would wait around for her. He was someone who knew his worth. The third thing is that you're emotionally unavailable, but not damaged. Now hold up before you get the wrong idea. I'm not talking about being cold or distant. I'm talking about emotional unavailability that comes from being genuinely focused on your own growth and goals. See, most guys, when they meet a woman they like, they become emotionally available immediately. They're ready to share their deepest secrets, plan their future together, open up about everything. But here's the thing. Emotional availability should be earned, not given away for free. When you're emotionally unavailable in the right way, it means you're not looking for her to complete you. You're not trying to fill some void in your life with her presence. You're already complete. You're already focused on building something important. This drives women crazy in the best way possible because they're used to guys who need them. But when you don't need her, when you want her but you don't need her, that's when you become irresistible. She starts thinking, what is he so focused on? Why isn't he more interested in me? What's he building that's more important than spending every free moment with me? And those thoughts, my guy, those thoughts consume her. But here's the key. You can't fake this. You can't pretend to be emotionally unavailable while secretly being desperate for her attention. It has to be real. You have to genuinely have something in your life that you're passionate about, something that drives you, something that matters more than any relationship. Maybe you're building a business, maybe you're training for something, maybe you're working on a skill that excites you. Whatever it is, it has to be real, because authenticity is something women can sense immediately. The fourth thing is that you challenge her, but not in obvious ways. Here's something most guys never figure out. Women want to be challenged, but not in the way you think. They don't want you to argue with them about everything. They don't want you to be contrary just to be contrary. The challenge that makes women think about you nonstop is intellectual and emotional. You challenge her to be better. You challenge her assumptions. You challenge her to think differently. Let me give you an example. Most guys, when a woman complains about something, they either try to fix it immediately or they just agree and validate her feelings. But the man who occupies her thoughts, he responds differently. She might say, I hate my job. It's so stressful. And instead of saying, oh, that sucks, you should quit, or yeah, work is the worst, he might say, what is it about the stress that bothers you most? Is it the actual work, or is it that you're not being challenged enough? See what he did there? He didn't dismiss her feelings, but he also didn't just validate them. He challenged her to think deeper about what she's really feeling. And that kind of challenge, that makes her mind work. That's what creates those mental loops. Or maybe she has some belief about herself that's limiting her. And instead of just accepting it, you challenge it in a way that makes her question everything she thought she knew about herself. But here's the crucial part. You're not challenging her to tear her down. You're challenging her because you see her potential. You see something in her that maybe she doesn't even see in herself yet. Women are constantly surrounded by men who either put them on a pedestal or try to bring them down. But rarely do they meet a man who sees them clearly, who appreciates them, but also challenges them to grow. And when you become that man, when you're the one who makes her think deeper, feel more, question herself in productive ways, you become unforgettable. The fifth thing is that you're genuinely indifferent to the outcome. This is the big one. This is what separates boys from men. This is what makes the difference between a guy she forgets in a week and a guy she thinks about for years. Indifference to the outcome. Most men, when they're interested in a woman, they become outcome dependent. They need her to like them back. They need her to choose them. They need her to validate their worth. And that neediness, that desperation, even when it's well hidden, it's repulsive. But when you're genuinely indifferent to whether she chooses you or not, when you're genuinely okay with walking away, when you know that your worth isn't determined by her interest in you, that's when you become irresistible. Now, I'm not talking about playing games or pretending you don't care. I'm talking about genuine indifference that comes from knowing yourself, knowing your worth, and knowing that you have options. Here's what happens in her mind when you're genuinely indifferent. She starts thinking, wait, he's not trying to impress me. He's not trying to win me over. He's not chasing me like every other guy does. What's different about him? And then she starts chasing you. She starts trying to figure out what makes you tick. She starts wondering if she's good enough for you, instead of you wondering if you're good enough for her. I knew this guy who was dating this woman who was used to having men wrapped around her finger. Beautiful, successful, used to getting whatever she wanted from guys. But this guy, he was different. He'd take her out, have a great time, And then at the end of the night, he'd say, "I had fun tonight," and just leave. No trying to extend the date, no pushing for more, no neediness, just genuine enjoyment of the moment and genuine indifference to what happened next. And it drove her crazy. She started texting him first, calling him first, making plans. She went from being the pursued to being the pursuer. But here's the thing, he wasn't playing games. He genuinely didn't need her validation. He had his own life, his own goals, his own sense of worth. And that authentic indifference, that's what made him irresistible. Now let me tell you what happens when you combine all 5 of these things. When you're unpredictable, when you have real boundaries, when you're emotionally unavailable for the right reasons, when you challenge her in meaningful ways, and when you're genuinely indifferent to the outcome. You become the guy she can't stop thinking about. You become the guy who occupies her mental space even when you're not around. You become the guy she compares every other guy to. But here's what I need you to understand. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about playing games. This is about becoming the kind of man who naturally creates attraction because he's focused on his own growth, his own goals, his own life. See, most guys try to create attraction by doing things for women, by being available, by being accommodating. But attraction doesn't work that way. Attraction is created by being the kind of person who doesn't need anyone else's validation to feel complete. When you're unpredictable, it's because you're living an interesting life. When you have boundaries, it's because you respect yourself. When you're emotionally unavailable, it's because you're focused on your purpose. When you challenge her, it's because you see her potential. And when you're indifferent to the outcome, it's because you know your worth. And all of these things combined, they create something powerful. They create a man who doesn't just get attention, he commands it. He doesn't just get interest, he gets obsession. But not the unhealthy kind, the kind where she genuinely admires and respects him. Now I want to be clear about something. This isn't about being perfect. This isn't about never showing vulnerability or emotion. This is about being selective about when and how you show those things. Vulnerability is powerful, but it's powerful when it's earned. When it's given to someone who's proven they deserve it, not when it's given away freely to anyone who shows interest. Emotion is attractive, but it's attractive when it comes from a place of strength, not when it comes from a place of neediness or desperation. The man who occupies a woman's thoughts nonstop, he's not afraid of his emotions. He's not afraid of vulnerability. But he's selective about when he shows these things because he knows they're valuable. Here's what I want you to do starting today. I want you to audit your behavior. Are you being predictable? Are you always available? Are you bending over backward to please her? Are you seeking her validation? Are you afraid of losing her? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then you need to make some changes. Not because you want to manipulate her, but because you want to become the kind of man who naturally creates attraction. Start by focusing on your own life, your own goals, your own growth. Become genuinely busy with things that matter to you. Develop your own interests, your own passions, your own purpose. Establish real boundaries, not because you want to play games, but because you respect yourself enough to demand respect from others. Become emotionally unavailable, not because you're damaged, but because you're focused on building something important. Challenge her, not to tear her down, but because you see her potential and you want to help her grow. And most importantly, develop genuine indifference to the outcome. Not because you don't care, but because you know your worth isn't determined by anyone else's interest in you. When you do these things, when you become this kind of man, something magical happens. You stop chasing and you start attracting. You stop needing and you start commanding respect. You stop being forgettable and you start being unforgettable. And the woman who's meant for you, the one who deserves you, she'll recognize your worth. She'll appreciate your strength. She'll be drawn to your authenticity. And she won't be able to stop thinking about you. But here's the beautiful part. Even if she doesn't, even if she's not smart enough to recognize what she's lost, you'll be okay. Because you'll know your worth. You'll know that you're the kind of man who creates attraction naturally, not through desperation or manipulation, but through genuine strength, character, and purpose. Remember, my guy, attraction isn't about doing things for women. It's about being the kind of man who doesn't need to chase because he's worth being chased. It's about being the kind of man who creates mental loops in a woman's mind, not through games or tricks, but through genuine strength, authenticity, and purpose. It's about being the kind of man who occupies her thoughts nonstop because he's genuinely unforgettable. So start today. Start building that life. Start becoming that man. And watch how everything changes. Because when you become the kind of man who naturally creates attraction, when you become the kind of man who doesn't need anyone's validation to feel complete, when you become the kind of man who's focused on his own growth and purpose, everything else falls into place. The right woman will recognize your worth. She'll be drawn to your strength. She'll appreciate your authenticity. And she won't be able to stop thinking about you. And that, my guy, that's when you know you've made it. That's when you know you've become the kind of man who doesn't just get attention, he commands it. Who doesn't just get interest, he gets genuine admiration and respect. Now go out there and become that man.